It's truly a pleasure and privilege to welcome each one of you, our distinguished chair and our distinguished speakers, our attendees, and they are from all over the world. You will be happy to know. So let me begin by a warm welcome to Vaishali Sinha, our moderator for this webinar, the panelists, Dr. Alka Mittal, Ms. Arundhati Bhattacharya, Ms. Hema Ravichandar, Ms. Nishtha Satyam, and Ms. Anjali Singh. And of course, as I mentioned to you, that all our participants are from all over India and also from rest of the other geographies as well. And I'm delighted to share with you today, we have over 1,000 people who have registered for this webinar. And this would have not attracted so much response but for our distinguished speakers and the chair of the session. So I want to really thank each one of you for first accepting our invitation. You know that how this subject has become so relevant and so needed today, the way we see the work-life balance, the way we see the work itself. So my sincere thanks to all of you. And I must also tell you that this webinar is also presented along with UN Women under We Empower Asia program. The program is supported by the European Union, and within this program, UNGC is partnering with UN Women to promote women's empowerment at the workplace, marketplace, and communities. So we thank as well UN Women for really coming on board, because it is a common agenda that we all need today addressing, not only in India but globally as well. So at this time of crisis, the women leaders, along with the top management of any organization, can play a vital role in guiding and placing women at the center of their mandate, both during and after this crisis. We need to see the challenges women labor force participation is facing during this time of COVID-19, and how we as the leaders can support our female employees post COVID-19. It is high time that we adopt the workplace practices and promote the use of digital technology, which will bring in more equitable societies and lead to long-term solutions, which must be viable and sustainable in the post-COVID era. Our eminent panelists, who are, I would say, that accomplished leaders who have proven their leadership, whatever the organization that they had represented or they are representing now, and they speak themselves, and that is why they are here. And today we have requested to share new approaches and practices to proactively promote women empowerment, leadership, and their physical and mental well-being during the pandemic, which will take multiple steps to battle the COVID-19 situation. We look forward to a very thought-provoking and a very engaging and outcome-driven discussion today. And I really wish that a happy learning to one and all. Before I hand over the proceeding to our anchor, moderator, Ms. Vaishali Sinha, let me say a few words about her. She is chairing today our GES, Gender Equity Core Committee, and she also leads Renew Power, More Than Sustainability, CSR. She is truly driving that company every day, every hour, every month, or even every year. And we could have not got a better moderator or a chair who could make the best out of it and also maximize the value from our learned, distinguished speakers today. One thing I want to also add it here, the fact that today UN Global Compact Network India is recognized by the UNGC New York. It is largely to her leadership and the way she has driven the agenda in India more than before. So with those opening remarks, I welcome each one of you again and also hand over the proceeding to our chair, Ms. Vaishali Sinha. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that Very generous introduction, Kamalji. You always make me feel on top of the world when I am on, platforms and events with you. And thank you for your kindness. I'm really honored to be a part of this really distinguished panel which you've organized. And we have such accomplished women who have really overcome lots of barriers to avail opportunities. And so thank you, all of you, for joining us today. I'm so confident that over the next 90 odd minutes, we'll have an enlightening, engaging, and an extremely informative conversation. And I'm told by the UNGCNI team that we have over 1,000 registered participants, which has been a record for them over the last few months since they've been having these conversations. So we're really excited, and I hope you find this conversation useful. Before I start, I just wanted to salute all the women out there who are really kind of toiling at home, at work, and making the best and keeping the environment positive. So big salute to them, and of course to so many women who are in the front line doing really some very, very difficult and challenging work. So a big salute to all of them, and of course our frontliners, all of them, whoever's out there. While we sit at home protecting ourselves, they are saving lives, which is a big deal in this environment. So grateful for to all of them. I think over the last months, what we've seen is that as we've had to lock down and prioritize safety, not only for ourselves but for our employees and for their families, etc. It's been an awfully difficult time, and as we work from home, it's become clear that we can all be quite effective. Even women find it a very convenient option, though in these times the burden on them has been significant, and we're going to talk about that in our conversation. But this kind of working from home using technology. I only wish there was like non-stop electricity with renewables coming in, because that's the only, I think, savior. We think of technology, but you know what? I'd urge everybody to even think about, we have technology because we have power in a way, to a great extent. I was on Wi-Fi some time back, and I had to switch. I was on my phone hotspot. So having electricity and hence being able to use technology has been pretty key. And so this could be a new normal. The question we're going to ask today is that what does it mean for women in this environment, in this changing environment where corporates are going to prioritize, probably getting people to work from home because it's going to help them save cost as well. Before we delve deeper into this conversation, I'd like to take a step forward and look at how has this pandemic impacted women. As we know, and as we look at other pandemics in Africa, and even in recently the H1N1, which was centered in Hong Kong, etc., we've seen that these pandemics disproportionately impact women, right? And so we have to think about how would events like COVID magnify the already very deeply entrenched socioeconomic gender equities which exist. Right, so that's something we're going to get our panelists to opine on and share their views on. The other thing which is awfully worrying is that while a lot of us on this webinar sit at home trying to protect ourselves and trying to just work, there are many women out there who are really facing severe issues around domestic violence and abuse. And data suggests that this has really grown and gone on top of the roof, and it's terrible. And that's something we really need to think about in terms of how can this not be repeated if at all we were to have another pandemic, or even now, right? There is no recourse to these women who are at the receiving end of this domestic violence, no neighbors, no NGOs, nobody to call. So we really need to think about this. This is a very important issue that The other thing we need to talk about is that there is a lot of pressure on women who are at home. We talked about it, that they really need to juggle a lot. Men don't step up as much as they should. Some of them do. There are exceptions, but mostly they don't. So the burden of having men, spouses and children at home with no help has offered a huge amount of stress to women, and and is adversely impacting mental health. There are growing cases of depression, etc., so on and so forth. So we need to talk about that too on this webinar. Right. And the other point which I want to bring up is, and I hope I can get the panelists to give that perspective during this conversation, is that there is huge amount of economic inequity. A lot of, if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, during lockdown, several daily wagers have lost jobs, right? And a bulk of these job losers are women, right? And when you lose a job, you also lose some amount of respect and importance you have in your family. So it's again a negative situation for women. The other thing is, a lot of the sort of jobs which have gone are sectors which employ women. If you look at the parlors, kind of spas, aviation, hospitality, tourism, it's a long list. Many women get employed across the pyramid. So we need to talk about it. What can be done? What can the government do? What can the corporates do? What can each of us do at an independent individual level of responsibility, towards our maids as well, and towards our employees as well, and towards those in the community who we have nothing to do to. So what can we do for them, right? So how can government intervene? How can corporates intervene? These are some of the conversations we are going to have around the new normal, which we are going to observe once the lockdown is over. What does it mean for women professionals? How is the work environment changing, and how can women equip themselves, and what is it that they should do to be able to be out there and ensure that our trajectory of kind of minimizing and working on a gender neutral environment is on track. Right. So with that, and without much ado, I'd like to start my conversation. So I'll start with Ms. Bhattacharya. Ma'am, you are really a role model for a lot of women professionals. You've been such a successful banker, and we all look up to you for mentorship and also a great sense of pride with respect to how much you achieved. Right now you are, kind of leading Salesforce now. In India, we've observed that, banks, jobs in the banking sector has been a very friendly employer for women. Right now, with all of this changing and the work from home kind of picking up, do you think banks are going to, gear themselves for this new normal? And how are they going to be doing this?
So first of all, good evening. Good evening to all of the panelists as well as to all of the people who are logged in. I have a unique advantage of now getting a first-hand view of both the banking sector as well as the IT sector. Even earlier, I used to think that these two sectors were most women-friendly. But now, having got an inside view, I would say the IT sector is far more women-friendly than actually even the banking sector. What I was saying is that, if you look at the banking sector, when I was there, one of the studies that we had done was to determine why at the time of entry we had 33% women, but when it came to senior management, we had only 4%. That was really, really quite upsetting. And we tried to determine why people fall off. And we found that 48% of the women, they quit only because of familial obligations. Obligations towards children, obligations toward older parents or parents-in-law. And therefore, we put in a 2-year sabbatical to enable them to take that sabbatical, go attend to their family duties and come back. We also found that of the people who were leaving for such purposes, 91% of them actually wanted to come back and work again, which they couldn't because they had left. So then, it struck me that people were, when they took these sabbaticals, they then missed out on things like promotions, they missed out on seniority. So there was a lot of issue because of that. And that is when I tried very hard to put in a work from home platform for the women, so that, even if they have to stay at home, they don't need to actually go off the workforce. There are very many jobs which I thought could be done from the house, and therefore I wanted this platform to come. This was sometime, I would say, in 2015. Let me tell you that there were segments in the bank that really resisted this, really pushed back, because they felt the moment you start something like work from home, you'd have people who would actually stay at home and not really do the work. And, they would instead be surfing the net or doing their WhatsApp or whatever, but they would not be working. And this situation now, the COVID situation now, has really proved, how wrong we were to mistrust our people. Because, in the recent years, or the recent days rather, when within Salesforce, we have taken a review of the people working from home, and in Salesforce, almost 98% people are now working from home. We have found that, in respect of, say, something like the support team has never had such good attendance. But not only such good attendance, it's never had such good time to attend calls and resolve them. So literally, whenever there was a support call that was landing, it was getting attended within the shortest possible time. And they have actually improved their time to respond far more than when they were coming on duty. So the thought that, we can't trust our people if they work from somewhere else other than the office, I think, at least in my mind, I'm absolutely comprehensively convinced that that is not correct. If you trust people to do something, they will normally do it. There would obviously be one or two cases of abuse, but that is there in any case. Even when people come to office, they do it that way. Now, if you think about it that way, how is this going to help women? And actually speaking, I was looking at a website and here, in that website, it says, this is a job portal for women. And they are saying on the job search portal for women, the number of jobs posted has actually gone up by 30% in the last 1 month, because it's all work from home. And the number of women applying has actually increased by 50% on this job portal. So then you can start to imagine how many other women who are sitting at home, not able to get the opportunity to work, who are now getting that opportunity and therefore applying. And I think, it will work both ways. Earlier, women had the compulsion of staying at home because they had to provide certain familial services. Okay. Now, if both people can work from home, maybe the other spouse, maybe the husband can also stay at home so that the woman can step out. It was because the husband was unable to stay at home that the woman actually gave up the job and stayed in. Now, if both can work from home, then it can be either one of them who can step out. Not necessarily, it will only be the woman who will work from home and not the husband. The husband also maybe can work from home and the woman can step out. They can take it in turn, so to speak. And the other thing I think, that this COVID has also brought in is the social distancing. The social distancing actually will mean that companies begin to work in shifts. As they begin to work in shifts, individual couples can take it in turn to go for different shifts so that somebody is always at home. So then, the need for the woman to give up the job and stay at home, even that gets taken care. So I think, overall, this is a new world that we are going to see as we negotiate the COVID issue. I think for banks as well, they already had the platform. They have not been using it so extensively. In the lockdown, they have begun using it more extensively. And I can tell you there are lots and lots of jobs which can just as well be done from home, as long as we trust our people to do it. If we do that, and if we put in the necessary checks and balances, I think actually speaking, this opens up huge opportunities for the educated labor force to actually get in and work. And one very small interaction regarding the people who are on the other side of the platform, that is in the semi-urban, in the rural areas. Again, in those cases, we have seen, at least where the SHGs were concerned, some of the most successful SHGs are those where people meet for a little period of time, but the regular work is being done from home. So, if you take something like, say, the chicken curry done in Lucknow, and I used to know the Seva people who were there who were getting it done. They used to get the people together for training. They used to get the people together for regular interactions, say once a month or once in 2 months. But for the work that was to be done, they used to deliver it to the people's houses, the material, the designs, and the threads, and then they would collect it back again. So, if you can make this work from home something of a much more stable platform, then I think, you will see the participation of the women labor force increasing, and that will be good for everybody all around. Because at the end of the day, even the domestic violence that you're talking about, much of this can be decreased if there is more economic power in the hands of women. The
Sure.
solution, I think, are twofold. One is education and the other is economic power. If we can deliver these more at home where women already are, I think, we have a win.
Great. Now that was wonderful. Just very quickly, if you could give me a very short answer to this question. You just said there are a number of women who are registering for jobs, etc., increasing. I would imagine that a lot of women, educated women, qualified women who went to work and had to stop due to family reasons are now going to feel empowered to be able to do more from home, right? So on one side is positive news for women, but on the other side, as you have seen, Ms. Bhattacharya, at work, and I want you to either validate it or not, that when things go tight, when it's a difficult time, often women are the ones who get sort of, kind of compromised in terms of having a job, etc. So is that going to become more now? I mean, on one hand, you have more women, and on the other hand, are there going to be more women on the firing line, as often has been seen is the case when kind of tough things happen in companies?
So I don't really think that's the case anymore. Most companies these days, they value gender diversity. And at least, the company that I'm in right now, Salesforce, they have a very, very active diversity agenda. So equality is one of the values they perform. And, something which is very strange is that the founder of the company, Mark Benioff, actually, he undertook a survey of the people in the country to find out whether people were being paid differently. That is, men and women were being paid differently. When he asked his people to do the survey, people came and told him that in case we do find a difference, you'll have to be making that up, so more money will be spent. And he was very sure, that there was actually no inequality. So he said, no problem, I put my money where I'm speaking, and you go ahead and do the survey. The survey was done. And strangely enough, even in this company, they did find differences. And the company ended up paying $10.3 million more in ensuring that everybody was brought up to speed, so that men and women were getting paid the same for the same amount of work. But that's the way they lived their values. And therefore, there are many such companies. And these companies, they value the diversity. So I don't think, if there are layoffs, they will be targeted with women. That I do not think is going to happen. Not at least in this area.
Okay, great. Now we need more CEOs and founders like him, and I think the workplace will be a better place for women for sure if that were to happen. So thank you so much for those insights, Ms. Bhattacharya. Let me come to Ms. Mittal. You are such a seasoned HR professional, and it's really wonderful to have you on this webinar. The question for you is, I wanted to ask you, do you see a paradigm shift for HR function in India post-COVID? How can policies be framed in a way that women professionals are effective, maybe from working from home, and yet they don't get disadvantaged while they work from home?
What I see in the COVID-19 scenario, in fact, in last 2 months, what I've seen as an HR professional, when I compare it with what we have seen in the last 35 years in this, I have been with ONGC all along. There's so much change that has come. There's so much change in the mindset of all those who are around me that I see. Not only the guys, but the girls as well. Earlier, the girls always used to feel that, okay, it's 5:30, I better be back home. Now they know that they are working from home, so they can work till. I have seen girls working through the day. and right up to post midnight. They don't have to worry about their own security, safety. That is one thing that struck me, when I was sitting at home and I was chatting with some of my colleagues, which was a mix of girls and women and gentlemen. So I realized that this is the best way. We left our conversation at 12:30 in the night, and 6 o'clock in the morning, we were again catching up with our morning bed tea in hand. And that is it. This is a way the whole world has changed just in 2 months. So while we do see what all has happened as a result of COVID, all the negatives, but there are so many positives which we see in between these all these COVID positives that we keep hearing about. So this is something which has really changed the way we are thinking in the public sector. When we used to look at recruiting, we would always feel, oh, there's a girl, so she'll have this constraint or that constraint. What I was very happy and proud about was that in the offshore, where about 2,500 of our executives and non-executives were posted, there were 9 girls who were working. And all those 9 girls, along with the others who were there, they continued to be in the fields, in the offshore platform for more than 60 days. In fact, there's one girl who's from Assam who's going to be relieved from her duty, I think by 21st of May. And when we used to, the entire board of ONGC, we used to connect with our personnel almost on weekly basis. So whenever we would talk with them, we saw that the girls were chirpier, they were quite settled over there, they were not showing an iota of doubt that they would not be able to continue being there. They were their very, very comfortable selves, very pally with their colleagues, and continued to work. And when 3 of them landed at Delhi airport, we had charter hired some flights just to relieve some of the personnel who had completed around 65 days. So last week when I went to receive them at the airport, the 3 girls were so comfortable, so happy to be back. But they said, ma'am, it was real fun because there's so much we learned in the process, because there were less numbers there and there was so much work to be done. And they were feeling so committed that they were working for the country, for the self-reliance in the area of oil and gas. So that is something, the girls are having quite a bit of inner grit, I would say, to continue. Yes. So that is it. So, and technology has really helped them in those who are there from office, who work in office. For them, they were not found missing from office. Girls, like as a norm, as a SOP, we had decided that girls who were expecting, those who had children below 5 years of age, as per the MHA guidelines, and even those who were physically having some special needs, they would not be asked to attend office even during the staggered timing. So those girls are working from home and contributing as much as any of us who's sitting in office is doing. So that has made us see the kind of opportunities which are there in this challenging period. And I was listening to Arundhati ma'am. Yes, in every sector I see there's so much that is going to change for better in the years to come. And I really hope and pray that in next few months we see the percentage of women employed in India much more than the present. I think it is about 26% right now. So the difference will be there, and then definitely we'll together make so much difference around us.
Absolutely, so ma'am. Very well said. And we need such women heroes, if I could say, like you described, you have in your company. And we need to also talk about such women more. I think women are in no way less. They can, I think, do anything and everything if given an opportunity and a chance. And so it's the onus is on us to raise our women like that, and then for work to give them an opportunity so that they can continue being like that. Often we've seen you raise women like that, and then at the workplace, boom, they face a roadblock. So we have to ensure that different stakeholders, family, work, they themselves, kind of go for it. And you're right, and that there will be a day where we will have women who are, as empowered and as many in the workforce as men are. Thank you so much, ma'am, for those words. I'd like to come to Nishtha now. Thanks for joining, Nishtha. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And, you bring such a broad perspective with respect to what the United Nations is doing around the world. And I'm sure you've got a much wider sort of view of what's happening to women in these times. I think I don't know if you'd agree, and if you've also seen that in other parts of the world, we've had, issues of physical, mental, social issues which women are facing. I believe we need policies, made by the government, advised by the United Nations, where, we can factor in gender issues when such policies are framed. To ensure that, generally life for women at the workplace and even outside is better. So any lessons from the rest of the world for us, and any your sort of perspectives for India in particular?
Sure. Well, thanks, Vishali. It's always a pleasure, and I'm really glad to meet some of the other women who I've been perpetually in awe of. Well, honestly, I'm not too sure. I almost want to mimic the optimism that is on the panel right now, but I may not be able to, because you see, like any disaster, and the United Nations has had the experience of dealing with a lot of them, like any disaster or any recession that leads to economic stress and high employment levels, and therefore greater violence within the household. We do see that women do get left out as we see the economy coming back. Given the situation where women are already on the fringe in terms of access to education, training, structural barriers, social norms, low-skilled and routine manufacturing jobs are predominantly held by women. So in cases, if you actually had to even study how people came back from Ebola in West Africa, there are two aspects that have come out very clear from that impact assessment. One, that women took much, much longer to come back to the jobs that they were in. Two, women, half of them also did not come back to the same kind of jobs, which essentially means that the existing gender pay gap, which is anywhere between 16 to 70% across the globe, an average of 35%, which is industry agnostic, is something that is likely to be expanded. The fact that women have historically held low-skilled and routine manufacturing jobs, have not had the same access to high-end jobs, and also at the same time that the fact that their challenges are coupled with structural barriers and social norms, there is a likelihood that we might leave women back as we come back, or as we hope to come back. However, what is important here to note is that to not be in that situation, we will have to intentionally center stage recovery on women and identify women as change agents. Now, there are two reasons for doing so. One, because they're 50% of the population. Two, because they're also 70% of the general workforce as health workers. So given that combination, I think it would be very hard to ignore women as change agents in a pandemic like this. However, I'm going to step back and talk about the two fundamental shifts, almost from a theoretical perspective, that a pandemic like this usually propagates. One is a fundamental shift in what constitutes work. So I think there is some of our imagination that we must apply to what work will look like in the future, or in the new normal, as we have been calling it. Two, related to work, is what is a workspace? I mean, today we are seeing the home space now being the new workspace. So from a policy legislation perspective, from an employer's perspective, how do we reimagine the workspace and now align all of our policies, all of our provisions to ensuring that the woman or the man are protected in from the new workspace that they have. Now, honestly, let's look at what the world looked like a little before the pandemic, right? I mean, machines and algorithms were supposed to create about 58 million jobs as per a 2018 World Economic Future of Jobs report. Now, we know that in the current pandemic, there are going to be drastic changes and substantial job losses. In fact, the ILO puts that benchmark as half of the workforce, which will take about 2 to 3 years to recover. So one question that we must ask is, what kind of jobs are going to come back, and what are the skills that we require in the world to be able to do that? The other thing that we were anyway moving towards, but is now going to stand accelerated, is the adoption of technology. Even in 2018, the McKinsey Global Institute estimated that there would be around 14% of the global workforce that would have to switch occupations or acquire new skills by 2030 because of artificial intelligence. Now, here we're talking about a pre-pandemic world. Now, apply all of this to the pandemic that is now accelerated both our willingness, our ability, and the urgency to adopt technology. So the two questions that we must really ask ourselves in terms of work is, who are we going to create jobs for? What will those jobs look like? And what kind of skills will it take to do those jobs? The other big answer that we should look at other pandemics is who are these people who are on the radar? We know that women constitute for a large part of labor-intensive industries. So that's the first risk that we have. We also know that women workers include for a lot of the people in the gig economy. Now we know that most gig workers who are already vulnerable are now seeing a dead end if the issue is not taken up immediately. In fact, we already have evidence to say that gig workers are facing a falling piece rate for deliveries. The three is women have been in a lot of jobs that cannot be no contact jobs. And I definitely like to bring the perspective of not just formal sector workers, but transgender, sex workers, and so on and so forth. So many marginalized communities who cannot afford to be in a no contact environment. So I think it's important while we estimate the impact of this, and I think the globe has faced similar crises, but every crisis is a new crisis in its own self, with its own character. So I think we're a little far from estimating what the impact of this crisis has been. But if we were to study pandemics, then it is an unfortunate reality that women take longer to come back, and even if they come back, they don't in fact come back to the same point that they left at. So having known that reality, it's important to understand what is it that we should be doing as employers, as the United Nations, as the government. Well, the truth also is that every pandemic, every disaster gives you the opportunity to hit the reset button. And we also, as people who have our own sphere of control, have access to that button. And there are about a couple of positive things that have come forward. One, of course, is the entire work from home policy. I know that there was, the perceptions that we weren't able to challenge, the perceptions that we weren't able to break. I think this has given an opportunity to challenge. What it has also done, and probably that's the only way this has been an equalizer, it has also given a similar opportunity for men to participate at home. I think so far we were looking at maternity leave, we were looking at women taking a sabbatical, we were enabling women to participate at home with a lesser cost to pay at work. But for the first time, we've also given an equal opportunity for men to participate at home. And I do think the crisis is likely to generate, even though temporary, an upward shift in men's participation in unpaid care work, with a sizable fraction of men taking responsibility in most cases for the very, very first time. Again, I say this based on evidence that we have and things that anecdotes that we are hearing really from some of our stakeholders on the ground. So we do think that if we were to intentionalize and pick this up as a learning that we could do with a work from home model if we put the right things in place, we could do with less infrastructure and be a more effective and efficient company. We would definitely be very enabling for women to participate in the workforce. And economic autonomy may not be the start of bringing women out of life cycle poverty, but it is definitely a very big, what do you say, way of getting women to participate in other aspects of life. So I'm really hoping that some of these changes are probably going to push India towards a trajectory shift in how women participate in the economy. That said, it is also subject to women in leadership. It is also subject to governments, to stakeholders, to employers, really realizing that women have to be intentionally at the center stage of investing for more sustainable, quicker, and long-lasting results.
Great. Thanks, Nishtha. As always, great points. I think the part I really like the most is the acceleration towards the 2030 goals, potentially, given the pandemic and the use of AI, etc. I think that's really going to be a positive, some positive out of a lot of the sort of glooms and dooms you've highlighted. But I think with the UN there and with the government, I'm sure we are all way more sensitized than we ever were. So we are probably going to kind of move ahead in the right direction. I guess inputs in a timely way post-pandemic from the United Nations would go a long way. I also feel an important point you raised around women in leadership is key. I think we've seen in countries where we have women leaders, they've handled COVID amazingly well, especially with respect to how women have been and their issues have been addressed. So great. I'd like to now come to Anjali. Anjali, Nishtha talked about infrastructure and we talked about reimagining the workplace. And I know Deutsche Bank has done, a lot in this space in terms of infrastructure and making work from home a reality in a way where, it's been quite seamless. I wanted to get your views on this issue. How much does it take? What does it take to invest in this phenomena of making work from home a preferred option?
So you're right. Thanks, Vishali. You're right. I think, to start with, Deutsche Bank has been a fairly conservative European bank. So if you'd asked DB about 6 months ago that how much of work from home do you do, they'd say, well, some of our leaders do work from home 1 day a week. And that was, pretty intense, and that's a lot because it's that 1 day, Friday or Monday, or you choose. It wasn't a work from home culture, which was rare because the world has been moving towards that. On the other end of the spectrum, even 6 months ago, if you'd spoken to a company like Amazon, they would have said, we're imagining a work from home scenario where we want 90% of our people to be working from home, when no pandemic had hit and nothing like that had happened, because that was the future of work and is the future of work, except the future kind of didn't wait for us to progress towards it. It came and fell in our lap thanks to the pandemic. So the pandemic was, I think it accelerated DB into actions that they may not have thought of doing for many, many months and years. And what's happened to the workforce globally is about 98 to 99% of DB employees are working from home. This isn't a pandemic that hit India. It isn't a pandemic that hit Germany or the US. So it wasn't about concentration risk in one geography. It was a global pandemic, probably the like of which none of us on this call have seen in our lifetimes, and we won't see again. So we are going toward a new normal. What did we do? For a bank that had been fairly traditional, I think we worked very, very swiftly. We acted very, fast. We have enabled all of our workforce to work effectively from home. And in that case, I would say, the shared services centers in India probably had some more work to do, because not everyone in India who works in a shared services at an associate level necessarily has a laptop, even necessarily has Wi-Fi broadband. So it was, I think, going from 30% work from home to 100% work from home within the time of 2 weeks. A lot of very quick decisions got taken about how we have to ensure that all of our workforce has the necessary IT enablement to do that, whether it was UPS, laptops, you need a monitor, you need Wi-Fi, reaching out to service providers, and the way we've got the laptops made available to our people before lockdowns happened in different countries, because like I said, the Indian workforce doesn't always have that. And we're almost at the next level now of thinking, that yes, it takes all of this, but it also talks about creating that workspace. Some companies already do it. So like some of the ITS service companies are actually talking in this vein, that if we want, and because the pandemic has brought that future of work right here, right now, you hear some companies who've gone out and said, we will always have 70 to 80% of our workforce work from home. That is where we're headed now. You know, coronavirus, COVID-19 has accelerated our glide path toward that. And those companies that are taking these decisions are now actually thinking of how we make sure we create workspaces for employees, and going to levels like, should we be providing chairs? What kind of, desktops? Is it better to work off monitors or laptops? And those are the questions. Look at the way we're able to have this, webinar today, and that's how people are communicating. If you've noticed over the past 2 months, almost every IT company has enabled some form of a webinar, whether it's Google, whether it's Facebook, whether it's WhatsApp. So it started with, you could have 4 people, now you can have 8 people, you can have 50 people, you can have 100 people. So the world is becoming a village, and I think technology has made that stand up very quickly. Therefore, the technology companies like Salesforce, Amazon, Facebook, they were probably more futuristic in how they were thinking of work from home. But now every company, including a bank like us, is thinking of work from home. And I just want to now point out what that does for women. I heard Nishta, and I think, there are things that we need to watch out for. But if I again rewind the clock and think of 5 or 6 years ago, in many forums of gender equality that I've, been to, talked about, what did women ask for very often? They asked for flexibility. So what did every company try to do? For our women workforce, we want to do flexible hours. We want to enable the environment for them to work, because some of them have young children. So should there be a creche on site? And all of these companies work towards making that flexibility possible for women. Well, guess what? The flexibility also just fell into their laps now, because every woman today is working from home, and so is the spouse. So today, gender equality has actually hit the work front, because both of you are working from home. So you have an opportunity not just to, do your office work from home, you have an opportunity to think about the load share of work at home. So if both of you are at home and both of you are working 8 hours a day, maybe you distribute the housework in a very different way. And the men have an opportunity to contribute. So when I'm speaking to my teams, a lot of the men have started saying, I tried my hand at cooking, because they're working from home. So it's going to change, the dynamics of how people are viewing certain roles. And I think it's a huge opportunity for women to embrace, because you've got the flexibility. You can put your hand up now. Every company's seen it's possible. Technology's enabled it. So there's a lot more that you can do as you go forward. Long answer. A lot has been said, so I'm going to stop here.
Yeah. No. Thanks a lot, Anjali. I think, my only one follow-up question to what you said is, we're all big companies here, Salesforce, you're talking about DB, etc. I wonder sometimes how easily we can do it in the mid caps as well. Is it going to be as seamless as, there is a huge investment which is required to be able to make this possible.
And you're absolutely right. It won't be possible everywhere. So if you look at most of the head of states, right, whether it's our prime minister, whether it's Trump, whether it's the UK prime minister, they're kind of stuck between a hard place and a rock, because they're going to have to balance economy versus the disease. And why is it that the work from home can't just bolster economy? Because there's a large segment that does need people to show up to work. Manufacturing needs that. Small businesses need that. The travel, the hospitality industry cannot ever have a work from home concept and continue to, be profitable. Therefore, there is a large segment that actually cannot work from home. So nothing changed for them. They would like to have people come back to work and the world go back to normal sooner than later. And there's another segment, especially in India, the small and medium business units that could be small travel agencies, small retail outlets, that don't have the wherewithal to set it up to work from home. Exactly what you're saying. And that's why I think, despite the virus not really subsiding in the world, almost every head of state has started to say, how do we balance the two? Because you've realized by locking down, you actually controlled the virus marginally. Maybe it would have been even worse. But what it's doing to economy is fairly serious and threatening because of these reasons, because of the mid cap, because of certain industries that need the world to go back to the old way as well. You need some travel, you need hospitality, all the restaurants. There's so many domains that actually need people to show up, and that's how they make money. And you need all of that to keep the world churning. So it is MNCs and global companies, banks, IT companies, which have the deeper pockets and have the ability to do this, which are going to probably survive better. But last point I'm going to make is, therefore, most governments have offered a huge stimulus package, and that stimulus package is directed towards that middle layer to keep them afloat. So I'm hoping at the end of this, we will not have too many companies be the casualty of COVID.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anjali. As always, very useful insights. I want to now come to Hema. Hema, I'm going to ask you my favorite question, and it's about women entrepreneurs, right? In a post-COVID world, we've talked, our Prime Minister's talked, called for localization and for an Atmanirbhar Bharat, right? Do you think we have enough enablers for an Atmanirbhar Nari Bharat, right? Will there be opportunities as we look inward, as we look at manufacturing and sourcing, supply chains and so on and so forth? Are there going to be entrepreneurial opportunities which women should grab? I guess for all our panelists who are, not our panelists, our attendees who are on the webinar, it would be useful to get your perspective on what could these opportunities be, and what is the support the government can provide, and as always, even the corporate. So where are the opportunities for women as far as entrepreneurship is concerned post-COVID?
Thank you, Vaishali. A very big hello to all panelists and to all the participants who are on this webinar. And to your question, I just want to step back a bit and take the segue from what you made in one of your opening comments, which was that this pandemic and this issue is really going to affect the informal sector, the temp sector, and issues where women have a predominance in terms of the industry. For example, 70% of women employed are employed in informal sector where there is no formal contract of work. Sectors most affected are those which have a high percentage of women, whether it's hospitality, whether it's travel, retail, and we all discussed that. And also temporary jobs have a large percentage of women. So when companies are actually going to do more with less, and when they're going to right size the workforce, countries are going to do that, governments are going to do that, the effect on women is going to be pretty high. And therefore, this pandemic is almost called a she-cession, not really a recession, but a she-cession. And there's actual data which is coming out, which says that 70% of the women say that now they're solely, while they're responsible for housework, 55% of the 20.5 million job lost in the US, where data is coming out from, is women. And about 50 to 60% of the unemployment claims filed in various states in the US, and I'm sure we can have similar data if data is available in India, is coming from women. So there's a big issue that this is going to face women. Now, given that, what about entrepreneurship? And I think this is a big plus that we need to look at. Because if you look at India Inc., 14% of women are really entrepreneur organizations. 14% of the organizations have women entrepreneurs at the helm. Second, startups are only 10% where they are women founders. And if you take financing, data shows that actually financing by financial agencies and private equity has dropped from 18% to 12% over the last 2 years. And 75% of these are self-financed. So if the government can bring in any kind of intervention which actually improves entrepreneurship, it can really help the she-cession and the loss of women workforce, whether they are in the temp places, whether they are in the industries which are primarily women oriented, or whether they are in the informal segment. But this is not going to happen by serendipity. It has to have a process around it. It has to have a method around it. And I call this a 4-quadrant kind of matrix, which we have to focus on. We have to have the enablers, and we have to have the behavior change. What do I mean by the enablers? The enablers are really, we have to help women build their competence to do this kind of entrepreneurship. We also need policies, whether it's from government, whether it's from corporates, whether it's from corporate body associations, which will help women entrepreneurs to really succeed. We also need behavior change. We need culture change. We need leaders, mentors, role models coming out and really helping out. I want to touch upon each of these a little bit and feel what we should do to really get women entrepreneurship off and running. On the competence building piece, I think we have to focus, of course, on K, S, and A: knowledge, skills, and attitude. What are the kind of knowledge that we need to focus on? You know, the STEM focus for women, education for women. You know, if you look at the quota IIT training classes, it was typically male dominated. And if you teach the IIT entrance, you had a normal percentage, 95+% of men compared to women. Now with virtual classes coming out and even quota going virtual, you know, things like what Alka said, safety not being a concern, parents will be encouraged to send their women out for some of these higher apping or exam testing training classes. So education has to be very, very important. Financial literacy for women and digital literacy will have to be very focused on if you want to build in that entrepreneurship. We have to encourage women to do out-of-box thinking. For example, a woman who was making blouses has turned to making masks. Now that's one way of, you know, lateral thinking. Physical to virtual classrooms. Makeup, which was very much physical, can that be online? And finally, a skill that has to be given to women is networking. Women are not great networkers. I finish my job, I go back home. I need to be able to network. That is important for entrepreneurship. As far as policies are concerned, I think women's representation in entrepreneur-related policies is absolutely critical. We have to have policies which ensure CSR funding goes towards women-owned businesses and women entrepreneurs. We have to support women businesses, whether it's through financial breathing or whether it's by reducing any constraint to business. We have to have financial products and services like we've come out, you know, whether it's on term adjustments, guaranteed digital payment, financial services, and even digital accelerators, which are focused on women. So all of that is really, really critical. So those are the enablers. As far as behavior is concerned, I think we need strong culture change. We have to remove gender discrimination, whether it's gender stereotypes, gender targeting, or even gender guilt in the socio-economic. In India, they say women do 577% more household work in an average house than men, even in households where both couple work. So, you know, these kind of social norms will have to be broken out. And finally, we'll need mentors, we'll need role models, we'll need champions, we'll need community organizations which encourage women to come out and do. Now to your second question, which is government doing enough and should we be doing more? I think we've already started. There is focus on some of this in the recent announcements that have been made, including some loans, etc., which are specifically granted to women-owned entrepreneurships. But you know, something like the Women Shri Shakti Challenge, which the UN has come up with, which encourages women entrepreneurs and solutions by women impacting women, or IIIT Hyderabad's COVID Hack program, which gives a 10 lakh rupees grant for problems around COVID-19 for startups which are either owned by women or which have larger number of women on the board. These are all green shoots which are coming to help increase women entrepreneurship. But it's not enough. You know, we have, for example, Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog has its the National Skill Development Policy and Women Entrepreneurship Platform in Niti Aayog, but whether we could have it very strongly for incubation, funding, marketing, skilling, and compliance of women-led entrepreneurships. And of course, ensuring that women have that behavior, they have the knowledge, they are given that kind of mentoring, as well as the policies, even a quota, if I may call it. I'm not for quotas normally, but sometimes you have to mandate through quota. For example, the women directorships, the Companies Act 2014 did one small change. They said one women director on the board. Of course, there was a hue and cry, should there be a quota? But in 2014, we had 6% of directors being women. And today we have 15%, you know, and over a period of time, the quality, the pipeline, all of that can improve. So sometimes even quota. So all of these will have to be really focused on if you want to get women entrepreneurship running. And I think it's critical because in recession, as you said, it's the temporary jobs, it's the informal sector, it is the right sizing and optimizing where women get hit. And entrepreneurship is a great road to follow. And let's hope that private, public, both the private sector champions, government and public sector champions come together to make that a reality.
That was fantastic. Music to the ears, love She-Session, a word I'm going to put in my notes to be used again and again and again. So thank you for that. And now, you know, we're going to move to a Q&A from our attendees. But before I do that, I'm going to have a bit of a fun round. You know, I call it the rapid fire round. So just making it a little bit fun. So Hema, as you just ended, I'll come to you. One favorite woman business leader and why? Just a snappy answer, quickly.
Well, I have her right bang in center in my panel here, Arundhati.
Okay.
I think she has done a tremendous seamless transition. You know, she's held a very, very tough job, managing multiple stakeholders in a job which is always high on the radar of the government, private sector, small sector. Sometimes you can never do right, but I don't think she took a wrong step. And she's made a seamless transition from that to tech and the private sector. So I'm really happy. And there she is right in the center of my panel here.
Wow, what a fantastic moment, huh? It's your kind of Kodak moment for you. You should take a quick picture of the screen, a screenshot for your.
I'll ask Kamal to give it to me later.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're not the only one. She has a lot of fans, and and that too in a male-dominated environment, she has stood out and has shown. So we are very proud of you, ma'am. My next question is for you. So if not a banker and not Salesforce, what would have been another career you would have chosen or you wanted to back then when you were in your 20s?
You know, actually, I really wanted to study what was called museology. That is, you know, the running of museums, because, you know, antiques and stuff like that, you know, attract me hugely. But back then, when we were in college, there was no such discipline. I couldn't find anything other than anthropology. And that was not exactly what I had wanted to study. Because, you know, I found that you could learn a lot from looking at things that had gone before. And the way you present them actually can make them live. So it's like time travel almost. And that's something that I really wanted to study and do something about. Couldn't do it. It's still in my bucket list.
It's never too late. You can take a sabbatical and you can do it, ma'am. I'm sure you can. So never say never. Thank you. Nishtha, I'll come to you. I see you next on my screen. How, in a word, how would you describe the lockdown life for anybody, not necessarily women?
Well, what is a word to describe? Well, it's fascinating, honestly. I mean, that's the word that I'd use, because it really fascinates us to, I think it has brought to fore a lot of things, you know, that the world's economy is failing because we're buying only what we need is fascinating. The fact that the environment seems to have come back almost in no time at all shows how forgiving the outside world is of you. And how short-lived their memory is versus how we hold a very long memory of things that hurt us. So in more ways than one, I think it's fascinating to see how everything is reacting differently. And also the fact of what really constitutes the meaning of life. I think it has become, whether we like it or not, I think there is some pressure to be retrospective, but there is also there's also this big opportunity to really reflect on what we add to the world and how the world treats us and how we treat the rest of things. So it's fascinating. It's a time to look back on things that we have done and could do differently maybe from here on.
Fantastic. Nishta, I would never imagine that COVID lockdown would be described as fascinating, but well done. I think that's great. A positive.
Just sorry, I know you haven't asked me this question, but I'm just going to ask myself who my favorite business person is, and I have to say that she's on the panel, not because she's on the panel, but really one of the most difficult jobs to do in the country, to head the State Bank of India. In good times, in bad times, it's a difficult job, and the warmth with which she dealt with. And I remember, I don't know if she remembers, but I remember that we were in New York for a gathering, and women had invited her, and she was busy really running from one thing to the other. She still had time to comment on my sari, and she still had time to stand and greet everybody in the very complex world that she handled with grace. With usually you see you imagine a certain aggressiveness, a certain forthcomingness, and all of that in somebody who handles the State Bank of India. There's really the central bank, but when I looked at her, she was everything else, and I'm truly stand in awe of someone like that. So a very, very good role model for women in the country.
Absolutely. That makes three of us. I'm sure Anjali will join in. And I want to say that I remember, Miriam, that makes all of us and many more. But I remember meeting you, ma'am, too, as a banker, and you really impressed me with your detail orientation, such detail orientation in the way you met and conducted meetings is something I took away when I met you. I think I was at Merrill then many years ago. But yes, it's wonderful to have role models like you. And thank you for doing what you've done and you continue to do. Really appreciate it. Anjali, for you now, your success mantra, which you'd like to share with the other millennials and the youngsters who are on the panel. Not that we are that old. We're all young, so we won't. I mean, but younger ones on the webinar. A mantra which worked for you, which you think will work for them too.
So I think it's actually the name of my blog, and I believe in it, and I think you've got to keep doing it. We live and we learn. So long as you live every day of your life and you keep learning, and you don't say that I'm, so and so age, so now I know it all, or I've, have so many years of work experience, so I know it all, or I've now arrived in life, so I know it all. So long as you're living and you're learning and you're willing to learn, and you have the humility to keep learning, and always say, if I know so much, I don't know so much more. That's really the fire in your belly that makes you wake up every morning, embrace life, go out there to learn, and give back probably the best of yourself. And you keep adding to yourself. That's why I've changed this job very recently, because I think there's so much more to learn now, and go to a different sort of side of the world, learn a different aspect of banking. So we live and we learn. That's my mantra.
Fantastic, and really a great mantra for all of us to learn from. So thanks for sharing it, Anjali. I'll now just go to some Q&A now. I think we have a few minutes left. We're running a little bit behind schedule. So, we talked and batted for work from home for women. Ironically, the question I have here is that work from home has added to stress at home, and by a lot. Right? Work hours are way longer. Work-life balance is extremely difficult. Please comment on an effective way to be able to sustain this if it were to become a new normal. If anybody wants to go, just raise your hands and go for it.
This morning I was on an internal, a webinar where I talked about impactful communication. And I've been asked the same question many times by employees in the bank who are saying work from home actually, it took away the boundaries, right? And I think some of us said that made people productive. So your productivity is actually far more, but it kind of took away your boundary of 9 o'clock I go to work, 7 o'clock I'm home, now's my dinner time with family, this is my 2 hours with my kids, because you're kind of always online now. So all I want to say is try to define those boundaries, even if you're working from home, especially if it becomes a long-term thing. So if it's your little kids, try and tell them that, hey, mom's got to spend the next 4 hours on her computer, but we're having lunch together. Or, you know what, I've got to work like from 9, depending on what you do. This is sort of my work time, but I've got 2 hours for you, and then switch it off, just like you'd leave office. And for those 2-3 hours, you wouldn't be constantly available. Unfortunately, with the smartphones, we're always available. But try to switch off and define those boundaries of this is my work and this is my home. It's now in the same place, but I'm still going to structure it in a way that I give my family the due, because that'll ease it. And those boundaries have blurred in all this work from home. I do think they'll come back, because as this becomes the new normal, everyone will have to define it and say, I will not look at my emails, when I'm still lying in bed. I will get up and I will do my exercise or meditation or whatever you do, and I will look at my emails at 8 o'clock or 8:30. It's a very good idea to define those boundaries as you go forward.
Okay. Hema, and then Ms. Bhattacharya, after that you.
Yeah. I want to just to add to that. I think it takes two hands to clap. So as we become and embrace this new normal, while individuals will have to do that, organizations will also have to invest a little bit. And one of the key things I believe at the micro level for it to succeed, at the the third level of the organization, second level of the organization, is some clear managerial training. So training for your managers on two things: time management and managing for results and not for effort. I want to reiterate this. Managers have to become good time managers, because if they start doing things in the 11th hour, then there is an expectation that just because somebody is at home, they are available 25/8, and that will not work. Second, again, if they do not time manage, they will look for those people who are actually available when they want to, and then reward those who put in effort and not look at the results. You see, we have right now, of course, there's pandemic parenting. So you are doing self-help childcare, you're doing self-help elder care, you're doing self-help kitchen care. But even in the new normal, when you have all those assistants and work from home, if the manager is not a great time manager and does not reward for results and not for effort, it's going to be very tough on anybody, man or woman, who works from home. That's my two piece.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Bhattacharya.
I just want to take off from where Hema left off, that, managers have a big role to play. I think, enterprises themselves need to give a signal that just because you're home, we do not expect to be for you to be on tap 24 hours a day. They have to very clearly say it's okay if you're not able to take your calls outside of office hours. It's okay if I'm not able to get you as soon as I call you. So, even organizations and enterprises must stop taking advantage of the fact that they are able to access their people at all hours of the day or night, unless and until it's a critical matter. So, we have to have discipline on all sides, on the sides of the enterprises, on the sides of the superiors, on the sides of the employees. All of them need to understand that this subdivision has to happen between work and home, and there has to be a balance. Otherwise, it will result in burnout. So you have to understand that there are certain times when a person will be concentrating and doing their office work, and there will be a certain time when they will give to the family, and they must be allowed that space.
In fact, organizations now have a byline which says, when you sign off, saying no response required outside
Yes.
of your normal working hours.
Yes.
Now, if that becomes the norm, then that will really play
Actually,
into what
Western organizations do this very, very well. Somehow, I don't find this in the Indian organizations. In the Indian organizations, there seems to be a feeling that the moment I call your person, wherever he is, he'll jump and take the mobile. And there is almost a sense of, what should I say, of annoyance that we've given them a mobile. How is he using it? Means just because you've given a mobile and you're paying for the mobile bill does not mean that you have the person on a leash for 24 hours. Yes, in a crisis, true, but not otherwise. And I think we've got to learn to respect these boundaries.
That's true. And you're right, ma'am, you said it very well, that I think there needs to be a framing of work from home and a tight framing of what does it mean and how does it work, and what is okay and what's not okay, what is in a way the regulation around working from home. And to that extent, do you think the government can do anything in terms of, this is a question which has come, that is there going to be a government driven or endorsed policy which companies will have to follow, given that a large part of the workforce is likely to be working from home if the experience has been as good as all of us think it has? Would like to take? Okay, Nishtha, please go ahead.
No, honestly, Vaishali, thus far, we've gone through version lockdown 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and all of us are, while we keep talking about the new normal in the post-COVID world, in our mind, this is all a temporary, a temporary phase that the world's going through. To be honest, we're all in it for the first time. I don't think any of us will be able to answer what that new normal looks like. Will we be working from home for a year, for 2 years? Will this be a trajectory shift for how the world organizes itself? So I think governments react or respond rather when the shift is permanent, when legislation kicks in, when it applies to the mass. And I think we're yet to get there, but for sure, if work from home, if the world picks up work from home as a model, as something that has worked in terms of productivity, in terms of returns, in terms of outcomes and results, and intentionalizes it. I think some policies, like for example, sexual harassment at the workplace, right? I mean, you just pick up one legislation, it has to go through a radical shift because you've redefined what the workplace is and the kind of harassment that one might be subjected to. So it's no longer you walking in and someone commenting. It could be an online interaction, which could be interpreted in multiple ways. So what we need to do essentially is, before governments respond, and it's very important that before governments respond, we really see what is the behavior change that has been accelerated, or rather brought into fore by a situation like this. How does existing pieces of legislation need to change, include, expand, contract? Yeah, so many things that apply to how we work and how we organize ourselves will have to be relooked at. Because the space of work has changed, and it is now your home. So how do you build that boundary, and how do you build responsibility, and also employer response, which is already a very complicated matter. So yeah, some of these things will probably radically change should the situation stay, or should we even want this situation to stay and intentionalize it as a way of going forward.
Great, thanks, Nishtha. I think one last question, and then I think we'll conclude the session. It's come directly for Hema, for you. So what can be done to take care of the mental well-being of women entrepreneurs, given that it's tough times, it's not easy for women entrepreneurs to get funding and, obviously sustaining their businesses and ventures. So there's a huge amount of insecurities which exist amongst women entrepreneurs. So do you have any advice for women who are entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think there are some initiatives already for entrepreneurs where they have mentorship by seasoned entrepreneurs who create a cohort of 10 or 15 leaders and give these 10 or 15 entrepreneurs advice on how they went through these challenges in a been there, done that scenario. If you kind of extrapolate that kind of a model through industry bodies, whether it's CII or whether it's NASSCOM or whether it's ASSOCHAM or any of those, FICCI, any of those, and create this. And, for example, FICCI Flow has a very strong women wing. And you can create these kind of crucibles of learning, so to say, because then you can share that. And I said, it's also knowledge, it's also skills. You need to help them understand financial literacy, help them understand digital literacy, help them understand the kind of opportunities that the new policies have brought in for them, and create role models and mentors for them who can do this. It would be great if companies kind of embrace this, not even in the formal CSR, but something that they would like to champion. It's something like in the US, you have women-owned businesses and you have a percentage of your business subcontracting supply going to women-owned businesses. If you create frameworks like that, and for those kind of businesses, give this kind of training. And of course, there is always the lots of information which is available, whether it's mindfulness, meditation, understanding some of the issues that really hit you when you're going through stress or anxiety. And there's lots of knowledge assets available on the net. So even creating, I know organizations have created this internally for their employees. If industry bodies and organizations with Kamal's help can do this for the larger population outside of organizations and in entrepreneurial mindset, then it will really help them and help them address these concerns.
Thank you. I think all great sort of suggestions, and I think a lot of companies are doing this. There's but definitely scope for a lot more. Brilliant ideas brought out in this webinar. I think women entrepreneurs need to be encouraged. Corporate India needs to go that extra mile. We need to understand how work from home is going to work, both for men and women. And also, I guess, provide the support system for people even beyond work to ensure that it is indeed effective. Of course, much needs to be done on the domestic violence front, which we talked about. Some great answers to these issues, and let's hope that we can all work together to come up with, solutions and march ahead and learn from this COVID experience, in a way where we can take a lot of the positives with us as we march along to ensure that as we go ahead in the world, that there is more neutrality and the workforce is more equitable for women. And I think for that, men really need to be a part of the conversation, and we need to be talking to men. As I always say, there's no point for us converted folks to be talking to each other. It's only then that the SDG 5 goals will not be a dream. So let's try and engage more men and communicate better with them so that we're all on the same plane. Kamalji, thank you for giving us this opportunity to have this chat, freewheeling chat. I really enjoyed moderating it. If I could pass it back to you for your closing comments.
Thank you so much, Vaishali. It was truly amazing, awesome, mind-blowing, if I have to say these words, because we could not have asked for more. The kind of speakers we had, the kind of practitioner who have seen life day in and out and yet succeeded. There may not be COVID-19 at that point of time, but still they are still showing the way. Eventuality, they are ready to take a plunge and make a difference. And that is where I feel a very silver lining for India, that if there is this woman power that we can bring to the fore as a UN woman or as a UN Global Compact. Hima has always inspired us, and many of you have always given us support. I'm sure we will make a difference. It is India century. It is going to be India time, and it is not going to happen without the active involvement of women at not only workforce, not only at society, but even at home. To me personally, all of you have given a very clear-cut road ahead or a blueprint that some of the experiences that by you are very clear solutions for many of the webinar attendees. And at 5:30, when one of my colleagues was knocking me, there were over 500 people by the time had registered. I don't know how many were today as of now, but it was truly to the extent of giving your back to the society, art of giving back, and also contributing beyond business. All of you have your own job, but you find time and opportunity where we bring you on a platform where you share your success, your challenges, your opportunity, how you have done it. With that note, our the attendees would have benefited immensely, and I'm sure this is the part of series of UN Global Compact uniting business to a better world and to respond to COVID-19. And I'm delighted with Nista presence here, both UN women, and we will work together. And in fact, both of us are working on UNGC and even Women Web Principles. And good news is that more companies are coming on board to recognize the fact that without women nothing can be achieved. It is the fact. So with that note, thank you to all my, I don't want to say my great well-wisher, the great well-wisher of the society. Without your all contribution, this webinar would have not been so successful. And I'm getting a lot of messages in the both chatting and as well as on my WhatsApp, and it is because of you. You have made our day. Thank you to each panelist from my core of heart, and also to Vaishali for leading from the front. Thank you so much. And I'm sure together we will make this difference. Together we will take this. Thank you so much.